So you have 3 kids, you're expecting another. When the 4th one's born, are you going to sit your 3 kids down and say, sorry kids, like, I know you were getting 33% of my love, but now you're only going to get 25%? Is that how you conceive of it?
No, not at all, because I do agree with what Blaze said about love is a continual, like, if there's more than enough to go around. I would say I agree with that, with the exception of with romantic relationships.
Why? My name's Ian. My pronouns are he and him. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, to a Jewish family that my grandparents believe in God and were into it and all that, but my parents did not, so I was never raised with any kind of religious upbringing. My parents are monogamous, have a great relationship. I would say they probably have the best relationship of all the couples I've met in my entire life. So when I started dating, I think I had very high expectations for what I would be looking for before I would settle down with someone and be monogamous. And that led to most of my adult life only really being engaged in pretty casual things, never really getting too serious. I was first exposed to like the idea of being poly by my good friend who's in my improv group named Mani. And when he first told me about it, I was like, wow, I would never do that, but good for you, man. Like, that's really cool. And then a few years later, I met Blaze, and we cast Blaze to play my wife in a project that we were producing. And it was after losing my little sister, so I was in a very, probably the worst headspace of my life. And Blaze was kind of one of the first people who got me to like laugh again and really enjoy life to a certain extent. And then we started writing together, and Blaze joined my improv group, and we became pretty good friends. And then, like, about a year and a half after knowing each other, Blaze came to me and told me about this thing that had happened with them and Mani, and asked me how I felt about it. And I was like, well, I have no right to tell you who to kiss and who not to kiss, but it led to Blaze saying, like, well, I actually really have feelings for you, but it would never work because you're obviously monogamous and you could never be poly, and that would never work for you because you're so vanilla and boring, and like obviously like we shouldn't even try that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm vanilla and boring. Like, all right, I didn't know that was who I am. And I took like a day or two to think about it, and I was like, I mean, if that's really the only thing stopping us, like I don't think that should be an obstacle. So then I told Blaze that, and we started trying this poly thing out. And
the paper.
Oh yeah, okay, you want me to include that too. So I went over to Blaze's house, and Blaze thought this was very cheesy at the time, but we wrote on this little piece of paper our names, and we wrote that we loved each other, we trusted each other, and we wanted each other to be happy. And I said, look, let's try this out. And if it doesn't go well, if either one of us just wants to go back to where we were right now before we tried this, we can bring up this piece of paper and just go back to that. And like easy peasy, no sweat about it. And then after our first date, Blaze was ready to abandon ship. And then 2 months later, Blaze was ready to abandon ship. We actually broke up. And then, I mean, these are just the facts of what happened. But it was one of those breakups where it's like we're breaking up, but we're still hanging out every day. And so that didn't last very long. And there's been a couple more in there. But through it all, we've, communicated and had love for each other and wanted each other to be happy and maintain the trust. And once COVID came, we decided I pretty quickly was like, this is going to last for a while. I see everybody making these short films. And I was like, Blaze, let's make a whole movie during lockdown. And I think part of the reason Blaze and I get all along so well is that they're on the same wavelength of like, well, that's crazy, but yeah, let's do it. And so writing a film about a couple that's been married for 8 years while we were had only been dating for a few months, was definitely an interesting experience that took us to some places I did not know. But I've learned a lot about myself and polyamory, and I am not somebody who personally identifies as poly. I think I could be happy in a monogamous relationship. I think I am happy in a polyamorous relationship. And I just happen to like fall in love with somebody who identifies as poly. And that's kind of shaped a lot of my feelings about different kinds of relationships.
I'm Blaze, they, them pronouns, sometimes she, her, will respond to sir. I grew up in a very religious, homeschooled environment in Vermont. My parents were married and very much had like the fundamentalist belief in marriage being between one man and one woman, you know, till death do us part at all costs, which unfortunately for the reality of who those two people were caused our household to be very tumultuous, abusive, really an unhealthy upbringing. And when I was going into 8th grade, my mom finally separated from my dad, which was very... My heart's pounding so hard right now. Yeah, just very difficult separation, a lot of aggression, a lot of rage, a lot of being tossed between two households. It was a really difficult time, and they both like continued to be very mentally unhealthy people. So I did not really see a healthy example of monogamous relationships, or relationships that were guided by, you know, really rigid religious principles. In fact, I saw many, many cases of the opposite. I think that when I was much younger, when I was like a kid, I just sort of imagined the future as this assumptive reality of the way things were presented to me as very black and white. And so I assumed I would always have to make that structure work. And even as a youth trying to date or start exploring, like having feelings for people, it never felt right. Like I would meet people even in high school and have feelings, but also have feelings for someone else. I am pansexual and poly as identity. And so I've always felt attraction to multiple people of all different genders. And didn't really see a lot of the other examples. Thankfully now I've seen a lot of examples of people who've made monogamy work in a very healthy and beautiful way. So I really respect that there are many options that work for different people. So for me, I think there was a lot of unhealthy attachment patterns as a youth. My college experience was like also just pretty reckless. I wasn't really trying to form deep connections with anyone. And then as I got older, you know, I started to have experiences that were more loving and more healthy. And I started to meet people who felt the same way I did, that these, you know, deep connections, deep physical, emotional, intimate connections could occur with multiple people at the same time. And I found books like The Ethical Slut, Polysecure, and met other people who were either in poly relationships or in committed relationships that were open, who were really making that lifestyle work for them. And it just felt like I'd really found, you know, my truth finally after many years of a lot of like negative self-talk about how I really felt. So it was really encouraging to finally be at that point. Where am I going with this? Should I talk about Ian?
It would be nice to be mentioned.
So I think there was just a lot of trauma in my relationship life. I got myself into really unsafe situations in college, and then even after college. So I have like sexual trauma, relationship trauma. And so I have like a lot of walls up to intimacy, but like always craved that deep love. And I think like at the end of the day, we are all looking for security, trust, you know, someone who loves us for who we are. I definitely didn't see it coming when I met Ian. We were really platonic and that felt safe for me. And then getting to know him in that way, I think really created a framework for it to grow into such a beautiful relationship that it is now, because we had that security in each other and that sort of like partnership before we ever really tried dating. We were both like there for each other through a lot of things. I became a single mom when I first moved to LA with someone who had no interest in becoming a father or a parent. And so that was and continues to be, challenging. And meeting someone who just loves being around me and my daughter for who we are together. It comes with dating both of us in a way. When you're a single parent, I really try to keep a lot of my dating relationships separate to a point. And then for that next level of intimacy, it has to be someone that I really trust and lean on. Not necessarily as a co-parent, but definitely as a really an attachment figure for both of us. And Ian has definitely become part of that, despite me sort of, I guess, having multiple instances of pushing him away. We always came back to each other and he really became that secure base for me in a lot of ways, which was something I hadn't had for many years. So yeah, really, really grateful for that in my life. A big factor of where I'm at right now is I'm going through thyroid cancer, which has been also really tumultuous. Just slap that on there. Nice hand I've been dealt. And having Ian to lean on through that as well has been incredible. And it's making me pretty foggy today, so he'll have to cut me off sometimes or finish my sentences for me. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here today and get to know you both and share our viewpoints and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being transparent and sharing with perfect strangers, really.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Well, it's kind of, we like to.
Okay, that's good.
I'm very open on social media and everything. I think the best way to find like-minded people or even find connection with people who think completely differently is through transparency. So I was really excited when we were interviewed for this because this is how I live my life. I historically have been almost honest to a fault. Where people have been that's, or Ian actually has been that's not honest, that's just mean. We can reframe that.
Don't need to hear every thought.
Right, I think it's helpful.
Yeah, thank you both for being so honest. And as far as what, just as I'm hearing you and watching you interact, my heart breaks for you because clearly you've both experienced some things, some life. The loss of a sister, Ian, a troubled family life growing up, and the struggles you've had since college and beyond, and now thyroid cancer. I mean, come on, and so I see you guys, and I see humanity, despite, like you said, the different perspectives, and this idea that we're all on this lifelong search to feel loved and to experience love and to feel like we're secure, we're safe, and we can be open with someone else. I think as you're sharing, that's what jumped out at me. Is wow, that's 100% how we feel. I don't want to speak totally for you, but just wanting to be loved and wanting to feel safe and wanting to feel accepted and wanting to feel there's this deep human condition in us that just will not settle until that need is met, right? And so in our various, and we'll share our story, but in our various kind of backgrounds, we'll always kind of highlight spots of brokenness in our own hearts, and because of our circumstance and because of maybe what wells up from within us, where we need someone to clearly and unequivocally tell us you are loved. And so when I hear you guys talking, I kind of hear my own voice a little bit in that. So I appreciate that. Cool.
I think what really just stood out to me is just your honesty and wanting to be known. I would rather hide, personally. I would rather hide the brokenness, and I'll share in my story just the embarrassment of a broken home or anything like that. I would rather just blend in with the crowd. But I know that is not helpful for people. That is not helpful to just try to hide. And so I think hearing your honesty, hearing the journey you guys have been on is encouraging to me. Kind of gives me a little kick in the rear to say, okay, you can be honest, you can share, you can show, the scars or whatever, because it speaks to a greater you grow from those, right? You grow and you become stronger. So I appreciate your honesty.
Thank you. Now I'm really curious to hear your story. I don't know if we're supposed to respond to what you said about your residence,
Yes.
but I think we should go right into your trauma.
Okay.
It seems like there's some trauma there.
You can do this.
Let's dig in.
You can do this. So I was born in Tacoma, Washington. I'm Selena. Sorry, I didn't even say that. I'm Selena. And I have one brother. He's 4 years younger than me. My mom grew up, they're military families. My mom was saved as a high schooler and went to a non-denominational church. My dad was Catholic. He's from Hawaii. And so they all kind of converged in the Pacific Northwest. And so we went to this non-denominational church for most of my life. My parents divorced when I was 8 and my brother was 4. My dad had walked away from us. My mom had tried to fight for him and wanted the relationship to work, so it took many years for them to get divorced. But he just wanted what he wanted. So we, by default of attending the church, we went to the Christian school. We were scholarship kids, single parent. Mom is learning how to be a registered nurse and take care of us. And so we were at grandparents' houses while she's in nursing school and going to school. And so I was so grateful for that, just that time, I think, in that school where we had teachers that cared about us. And but I remember being in first grade, and I remember being one of probably 2 kids that was from a single parent home, and I just wanted to hide that. Like I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't want them to know that my dad had left, and there was just there's so much deep shame, I think, about that. And it was not, I had been presented with Christian values, and so I kind of grew up knowing the Bible, like sounds like you guys do, loving, wanting to be an obedient child, right, to my parents, to the Lord. And so, fast forward to, was it junior high, middle school? He came to visit. His mom is an administrator at the Christian school, and so he came to visit. And
She was interviewing for a job, and I tagged along.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know him. He was kind of punk rock, Nirvana scene, Metallica, and I was like the good Christian school girl that I don't know what this music is. So we kind of met each other and didn't, and then a couple years later he came back. His hair was all one color. He just gotten back from football camp, and I don't know, it's like the doors opened and the light was behind him and wind blowing, and I was like, who is that? And they're all like, that's
Liam Neeson.
Yes, he's here. But they're like, that's Ryan. And I was like, Ryan who? That was me. I just was a little, I think, more in my own world, in my own space. And but to kind of back up to my home life, it was good with my mom. We had visited my dad on the weekends and stuff, but that was hard because he did have girlfriends through the years, and that was hard as a kid because you kind of just expect your parents to be a certain way. And then he just introduced us to whoever he was with, and so you kind of felt as a kid you were supposed to have that same acceptance. And so some might call it resilience. I called it self-preservation of just, okay, hi, welcoming them in. But it was really hard on my heart, and it didn't help me learn how to trust people very well. And I would rather hide. I would rather us have a good amount of space between us, and we can be close. But you don't get to know me for a long time because I don't know how long you're going to stick around. And that was really difficult for me. So our stories converged in high school. We did meet in high school, and we were friends, best friends. Friendship started, and I thought he was pretty cute. And I think it might sound so silly, but when we were teenagers, the things I loved about him, I still love today, of how he loves the Lord, how he seeks after the things that God values, and he leads our family well, and he loves me well. And so I'm just grateful for knowing him. But you can finish off our adventure.
Okay.
Where we're at.
I'll start at Little Ryan, and I'll build up to
Okay.
that. So in contrast to Selena, I grew up in a good home, I'll say. Not perfect, but good. My mom was a teacher most of my life at a Christian school, and my dad, he was a psychologist. So that was fun, growing up with a psychologist, always asking me how I felt about things and never knowing what to say. But he's good. I love my dad. And so I grew up in that, but then, like Selena was alluding to, I kind of had a stage, as most teenagers go through some sort of stage of thinking they know better than everyone else in the world. And mine looked like the full-on Seattle grunge scene and all the rebellion that went along with that. Thankfully, I didn't go down any dark paths that were too dark to return from. But it did lead me to some places. Namely, my parents sent me to a Christian camp one summer. Not because of my rebellion, so to speak, but just because it was a fun thing to do. So I'm at this camp, and of course, I immediately found all the mischief makers, right? All the kids that were like me. And somebody had brought explosives, fireworks. It was summer, so we had fireworks. And we all got this great idea to blow up a toilet.
Oh.
And it's a great idea. In general, it's a good idea. No. And so we did. We blew up a toilet in one of the cabins. And of course, got in a lot of trouble for that. And they sat us down and they said, listen, you guys, this was just one of many things we had done. It was kind of the tip of the iceberg. And I remember the counselor who sat us down had a literal come to Jesus talk. You hear about the come to Jesus talk. Well, this is literally what that was. And he said, I remember this verse that he quoted to me. And he said, those who try to keep their life will lose it. And those who love their life will lose it. But those who try to keep it, or try to give it away rather, to Christ will save it. And so I fumbled the verse. But the point is I felt like I was standing on the edge of this abyss, right? And I could feel something otherworldly, I'll just say, tugging on my heart. And I knew that it was not just what I'd eaten that day. It was something bigger than that. And I felt as if I was standing on the edge of this abyss, and Christ himself was calling me to leap, to jump, with no idea what to expect, to trust him fully with my life. And that meant for me in that moment, giving up all the silly, things that I was doing, but really pursuing him and my entire life. And so I did. I took the leap and said, you're right, I'm going to do this thing. I made the commitment to put my trust in Christ. Went home, a changed kid. I think that's right when Selena saw me come through those doors, because there's something different about me. I was not the kid that she had met all those years before. So we ended up dating in high school. We've been together actually, as of a few days ago, we've been together for 23 years.
Wow.
Now, married for 19, but we dated for 4 years. She's the only girl I've ever been with seriously. And so we got married young, 20 years old, basically, halfway through college at University of Washington. Got married, finished college as a married couple. Selena had this harebrained idea to go and be an au pair / groom at a Swiss riding facility, and just south of the Alps in Zurich, Switzerland. And so we went there. Long story short, I got really sick. I have a congenital heart defect where basically my heart does not work well. And that put me in the hospital facing death. And so for 5 weeks, I underwent heart surgery after the first week. Selena thinking this whole time, I'm going to have to send my husband home, my husband of less than 2 years, home in a casket. And instead, here I am. Doctors are great. God is gracious in that regard. Came home, but with a completely different perspective on life, and realized this life is very fleeting, very limited. And the few years that we do get, we need to spend those on something bigger than us, bigger than just pursuing what we want, pursuing our own selfishness, just finding this happiness in myself. It can't be found. I had to find it somewhere else, namely in the God of the Bible. And so went there, got home. Long story short, been married now, going on 19 years. And so, I'll stop it there, I guess.
Cool. I'll respond. Selena, your share just really hit me hard with that shame of knowing that your family structure doesn't look like a lot of others that's mirrored in society. My family would meet at National Day of Prayer and pray against divorce, and how it was just so prevalent, and how it was just breaking families apart. And then to have my own family end up going through divorce, there was a lot of shame there, especially with church friends being like, do you think your parents are going to hell now that they're divorced? And me being like, I don't know. Please don't ask me that. And I think that, it was very damaging to my young construct of faith, to have it be oh yeah, your faith is your works, and your works sometimes have to literally be survival, and they're not what the Bible says. And it just made me realize a lot of things. as a young child. And then I think some of that is mirrored in my relationship with my daughter, watching her grow up without any access to her dad. Like, it's clear even at 4, even at 2, that she notices, that a lot of other families have a mom and a dad, and that's the prevalent structure. And that it's difficult, they don't understand. They know they're different and they don't understand. And kids ask, where is your dad? And, I've had a lot of really casual conversations with Callie, so she really understands, her dad lives far away. He does not want to be our friend for whatever reason. It's nothing that she did or didn't do. And she has so many people who love her, Ian being one of them, my brothers, different people. So it showed me just like the structure of love can be many things. And like what I really want to promote is, people understanding that the structure of love can look different for a lot of different families, and like creating less of the shame around that. So it's like definitely part of my mission. And for you, something I reflected on was when I was originally saved as a kid and said that prayer, I was sitting on a toilet. So mine had to do with the toilet as well. And it's no longer the belief system that I subscribe to, but it was definitely a pivotal moment, and I felt that deep connection to a higher source. And I still feel that many times, usually less on the toilet. But
I think what resonated for me with your story was just, and I noticed this in the pre-show the reading that we had, because I read the whole email, is like how much your definition of yourself is relational. Like, you start by talking about your parents' stories and then your siblings, and really talking about who you have almost obligations or responsibility towards before we really even heard about like your own personal experience. And I think it stuck out to me because like I interpreted the questions we got and just completely the other way. And I was like, well, let me talk about me. And also what I noticed, there's a lot of similarities between your guys' story, and it's just fascinating how people can have like similar things happen to them and then react almost complete opposite ways, which kind of ties into what I was thinking when you said the thing about realizing that life, like wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself, and that like having this new perspective on life and really wanting to go away from like what you wanted and focus on like what you could do for the Lord. Because I also have had those realizations that like, it'd be nice to be part of something bigger than yourself and like all that. But for me, I was like, well, if this is the one life we have and life is fleeting, like I want to do all the things that like really bring passion to me and that I really am passionate about and really want to be involved in, which I guess is not the opposite of what you're saying, but it sounds like yours was a lot of like stamping down like your own instinct towards yourself, and mine was like leaning into it more after being like kind of a people pleaser or like a mediator my whole life. And then I also thought about what you were sharing was like how soon after you came to Jesus you met like the love of your life, and just like how interwoven those experiences have been for you. Because it's interesting, like something I was thinking was like, I wonder if you hadn't met Selena, like would you have stayed on this path?
Love is something that can be defined.
I would err on the side of no. I think that it means different things to different people. There's like 10,000 different kinds of love. Experientially for me, and what I see modeled in different places. So I think like nobody's definition can really necessarily encapsulate what it is for someone else, but that's just what I've observed and experienced. What do you think?
I feel like you have a question.
Well, I'll respond in terms of what we think or what I think. I think there's two ways to kind of look at it, like, because there's definitely a very subjective experience of love, right? I think we've been talking mainly about that, but I do think there is that love it can be defined, and I think the definition is more objective than I think our culture often will give it credit for. Meaning that objective, meaning that it's fixed. And yes, there are expressions that are very subjective, but when I'll use us as an example, right? When we said I do, I said I will give you myself, right? We stepped into an objective love and said, I'm going to make the decision to love you regardless, in some ways, and this is very countercultural, and I get that this is very grating, but regardless of what I get back, I'm making the decision to love you, no matter what I find out later down the road, no matter how you treat me. I'm going to try my best to love you. That's an objective thing to say. Now, the subjective experience of love that we've had has been very different than any couple that would maybe even say the same thing. They're going to say, yeah, our marriage has been great. I feel very fulfilled. At times, I feel like I love Selena like to the moon and back. And other times I feel like, man, this is really hard. And I don't...
Never.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I love you. But that's where the objective part comes in. I say, you know what, but I know I do. And I'm choosing to act out love because that's what love is.
Yeah. I admire that choosing to act out love, because I think like there's many different ideas. Like a lot of people think it's just a feeling, and like the actions-based love is really like something that comes a lot from Christianity. I think that's really valuable. I also just wanted to throw it out to you. I like how you're saying what we think, actually what I think, like correcting yourself to not speak for Selena too much, even though of course you seem very like unified on your viewpoints. It's just nice to see.
I just think it's interesting though that, I mean, because I agree that love can be defined and like everyone has their own definitions and whatever, like there's different kinds of love, but in your definition of love, you use the word love, which is like, English major here. Like,
Yes.
It's like you're absolutely not supposed to do that in a definition.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, can you define love without using that word?
That's a good question. I appreciate it. And totally right. You can't define a word with itself.
Yeah.
What is the essence of love? How do we break it down into its parts? And if I were to venture a guess or venture a definition, I would say love is first and foremost selfless. It's not about me. It's about the other. It's about being, it's completely and utterly beloved focused, right? And then along with that selflessness, there is a commitment. Something that is going to say, I'm not just here for now. You're not just somebody I'm helping up lovingly off the side of the road for a moment, but instead I'm choosing to love you over a period of time. And then with that selflessness, that commitment, and then now there's obviously not lastly, but I'll say it last, is just this closeness and intimacy, this connection, this wanting to know the deep person that you are and not just stay at the surface, but to go deeper. And so, if I had to define it, I'd say selflessness, commitment. We use the word covenant, and then intimacy, closeness.
And is that, because it sounds like you're very specifically talking about the love you have with Selena.
Yeah.
I mean, you also have 3 children and then a whole family. I mean, like, I think this is one of the problems with the word is like, we talk about love, and are we talking about a relationship? Or are we talking about the way you love your kids, the way you love your family? Yeah. Like, is that also how you define the love you have for your kids, for example?
Sure. I'll answer it quickly, but I would say in some regards, yes, with the exception of the parts that are unique to a marriage, right? So namely intimacy, obviously that component of it is very much reserved for one person and one person alone. But my daughters know this. Daddy loves you no matter what. And no matter what you do will change how I love you. I want certain things for you because I love you, and there's nothing you can do to push me away. So some of it, like the commitment, the selflessness, things like that, I think do transcend certain relationships.
I have 2 tracks mentally to go on from this.
Just pick one.
Okay, but I want to do both. So I'm just saying, like, don't talk until I'm done with both of you. I'm just kidding.
Right, 'cause I have no questions.
So do you think that sex equals intimacy or intimacy equals sex? Yeah, that's the question.
That's a good question. Do you want to go for it?
I mean, I can try. I do think that sex and intimacy, they lead to one another. I don't think they can be or should be excluding one another. Like, I think in order to build our sex life, right, we need to develop intimacy. But in order to develop intimacy, sometimes that means growing in our sex life, right? And so that would be my, I think, answer to that question.
Yeah, it's one of those words in English, like intimacy typically means sex, right?
But
I would say
emotional.
Intimacy is more than, it's not just
I feel like
sex.
saying that would make a lot of women very upset.
and you're right.
Yeah.
And for good reason, because it doesn't just mean sex.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you choose to love somebody, you're not just saying, I'm going to get the physical intimacy that I want from you. Instead, you're saying, I'm choosing to love you because I want to be close to all of you.
Emotionally,
spiritually, and physically in a marriage. Physically is where we believe that's where that comes to that culmination, is that when we are together, it's not just a physical act. It is an expression and giving of ourselves to each other freely. And there's an analogy to be made in terms of what we know what Jesus did in terms of being fully loved, fully known, fully naked, but still, even in all your flaws and all my flaws, I know it. You love me, and you know that I love you. I'm never going to reject you in that moment. It's a time to be close. And so, to answer your question, it's not just sex. No, I think it's sex is, we would phrase it like it's an outworking of a deep closeness between a husband and a wife.
Yeah.
Do you guys believe in like platonic intimacy? Like, I'm sure you have close like male friends. Like, there's something intimate to those relationships as well, right? Or is that not?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but I don't know, platonic. Yeah, that's probably the right word for it. Obviously there's no sex in those relationships.
Because I thought it was interesting when you were talking about your kids, you say, like, there's no intimacy there, which, I mean, granted, I'm the only one here who does not have kids, but I would think, like, knowing who your children are is like, and them knowing who you are is like a big part of building like, that familial love.
Absolutely. There's no, obviously, sexual intimacy, but the emotional and the spiritual intimacy we strive for and fail most days, but as parents, we definitely want to facilitate that relationship and grow with them and learn from them and have them learn from us, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think there is a physical, to hopefully not be misunderstood, but there is a physical closeness with our kids too, the snuggling and hugging and kissing and things that are really normal and natural.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
it just might feel weird to throw it under the umbrella.
Not in the same.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Selena, I know you're going to love this question before I get back to your check, because I was curious as soon as you guys told your story. Like, did you guys wait until marriage?
Yes. Yeah.
Somehow we did, yeah. That's actually one of the
4
reasons.
4 years, that is
so
impressive.
It's one of the reasons we got married so young.
Yeah.
Is because I was
thinking that.
Now, it was I'll use this word, it was a struggle for sure, and it got to the point where I realized, okay, I know I'm going to spend my life with this girl, and so I sold my car, I bought a ring, and I asked her to marry me.
She was like, you don't have a car.
Yeah.
Like, that was half my interest.
Where are we going to have our wedding night? I'm just kidding.
Yes. Jokes on me. Yeah, I had a question for you guys, too, about your definition of love, and has that been problematic with your relationships? Because if one of you expresses or feels it differently, how do you guys resolve that with maybe with each other because you're here, or with other relationships? Has that caused any problems or hurt or trauma in the past? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like my definition of love is always expanding. Kind of what I asked you, like I've experienced deep, deep intimacy with friendships long before I was ever able to connect sexual relationships with intimacy. To me, sex was something that I really like put in a box, and I really didn't want the two to intermingle because it was like far too vulnerable for me. And like the intimacy that I had with Ian before we ever decided to explore each other physically or dating or like call it what it was, it already felt like love, and it already felt, a deep sense of commitment to each other. I think that's why like kissing our mutual friend who's also poly was like, I feel like I'm somehow cheating on you, but also like this is literally like my identity, so how can I be cheating on you and we're not even dating yet? Well,
I mean, we were already saying like I love you to each other when we were just friends.
Yeah. I think like we found a real beautiful love and depth of intimacy without sex, which is what like allowed us to find it with sex. There's definitely been problems with jealousy, insecurity, like feeling unsure at times throughout exploring poly, especially since for Ian it was like different to be expressing that love with me and then knowing that I was also expressing it with other people, and he was as well. But it's something that like I just find so exciting to work through, because like jealousy happens in any relationship, whether you're monogamous or not. I would say, I don't know if you've experienced that, but I think it's like just a very natural human emotion, and it all depends how you approach it. And there's so many things you can learn from like choosing to, verbalize your jealousy and then see like where is the root of it? How can we make each other feel secure?
Hey friends, Greg here with Honest Discourse. We hope that you're enjoying this conversation. We are so excited for it to continue. But first, a brief message from our sponsor.
Hey friends, Pastor Matt here with Central Church. This episode of Honest Discourse is brought to you by Central Church in Collierville, Tennessee. You know, Central Church got behind this discussion because we really believe that this is what our world needs more of. We desperately need more understanding, more loving conversations with Christ at the center. And Central Church is a Bible-teaching, Bible-believing church in Collierville, Tennessee. We exist to multiply and to mature disciples of Jesus Christ, to produce Christ-centered relationships. And so we want to just put that offer out to you. If you're ever in the area, we sure would love to meet you. Drop by Collierville, Tennessee, and see what God is doing at Central Church. God bless. Hope to meet you in person.
A huge thank you to Central Church for sponsoring this episode. Now back to the conversation. There are ethical and non-ethical ways to engage in relationships.
Resounding yes. Absolutely.
Like, how can you say no to this?
Yeah,
It's good.
absolutely. Yeah, I think whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous or medium monogamous, like many partners, 2 partners, 10 partners, orgies, everything, like there's ethics. I think consent being number 1, which is informed consent, like all parties know what's going on, is like the first step. And yeah, honesty, like complete honesty, because otherwise nobody knows what's actually going on. And there's just like inevitable pain that will come from that. So.
And I'm really interested because knowing that you guys waited until marriage and this has been your one relationship, like when Blazer Eye has an interest in somebody else, which I think it's very natural to have feelings for other people. I'm not sure if you guys would agree with that or not, but one of the first things that happens is we tell the other person about it. And even as it progresses, if it turns into a relationship, whatever it turns into, like we're talking about it the whole time. So there's never a feeling of like, well, who is this person now? And like, why have I not heard about them? So I'm curious how you guys handle, like, have there been times in your relationship where one of you has had a deep, close friendship with somebody of the opposite sex? And like, have there been instances of like feeling even attraction or romantic interest in somebody else? And like, do you guys disclose that, or do you talk about it, or like, how do you handle it?
Before marriage, I mean, he broke up twice with me in high school. And then when we were engaged, some girl at the Christian frat, that sounds so funny, was super, super into him. And he's like, no. And I'm like, I know girls. So that was a little rough, I think, for us. And we had to navigate that at a young age. I think, yeah, I agree with your statement that attraction is natural. For us, it's what do we do with that if we find someone attractive outside of each other. Yeah. I think we have, like you said, I don't remember any real instances. I think that if there were, we would have come to each other and said, hey, I've been thinking about this person, or I noticed them. I want to honor us and our marriage and our covenant, so let's just talk about, it didn't lead anywhere, but I want you to be aware of these feelings. I think for a lot of marriages that we encounter, sometimes it's more on the addiction path, I think, and people they just want to hide some of those feelings, they want to hide those emotions, but I'm going to go back to us.
Addiction meaning sex addiction?
Yeah, and pornography and going elsewhere outside of their relationship. And so
you don't engage in like using pornography together yeah, okay.
Do you ever watch it on your own? Mm-hmm. Have you watched it on your own?
Yeah. I mean,
and you stopped when you got married, or you stopped?
No, actually never had it, never started until after we were married. And when I discovered, wow, sex is actually a lot tougher than I realized. Not everything I thought it would be. It had been built up to be something, given I grew up in the
purity
church.
culture. And all that.
Yeah, and there's some parts of that that should be jettisoned from the purity culture stuff. But there's also some truth in there. And it wasn't until after we'd been married that I had been introduced to it. And I knew it was there. It wasn't like I was naive. I just
Okay, so how were you introduced to it?
I was using a friend's computer to do some work because we were in college still, and I didn't have the internet because I didn't want to deal with it.
We didn't want to pay for it either.
I didn't want to pay for the internet. We were dirt poor. And I went to do a search, and when I typed in the URL, it auto-completed to some thing, and I was like, what's that? And then it just created thoughts where I was always thinking about it, and finally would go, find ways to partake on my own, and then finally just realized, man, this is going nowhere good, and told Selena, and your response is, still love you. Let's work on this. Because I think
that hurt me. And
absolutely, yeah. And that was devastating to me as a husband to see my wife feel a sense of betrayal, even though I hadn't had a physical affair with somebody. Still, I had an emotional there was
was there a clear expressed thing that this is not something we'll engage in, like a tenant of the relationship, let's say, beforehand? There was an expectation so that there was a sense of betrayal, or was it just you just assumed he wouldn't be doing something like that?
Yeah, I think there was an assumption, a naive assumption going in that because, we're Christians and we go to church. We don't do that. And so coming to grips with, okay, we are still sinners. We're still broken. We are still struggling with what people struggle with. And so we had to confront that and have a talk of, okay, these are things that we don't want in our marriage. And we value intimacy with only each other. And anything else that comes in, we need to talk about it. We need to apologize and forgive one another if that's necessary. And we need to be clear with how far things went and if it led to anything.
Yeah. And so in this sense, there was a consensus because we had a shared value system. And so when we entered into our marriage, we were both Christian, and we both said we want to follow Christ. We care about what the Bible says. It is authoritative in our lives. We read it.
Does the Bible say anything about porn, though?
It talks about lust. It talks about lusting after a woman as it's the same thing as committing adultery with that woman. Same thing for women looking at men lustfully. And Jesus would say the same thing about anger. It says when you're angry with kind of this wrathful anger towards somebody, it's as if you're murdering them in your heart.
So if you were watching porn really objectively as a study, for an essay, no, I'm just kidding.
But have you ever seen porn of any kind?
I don't think I have. I mean, not on the internet. Probably. Growing up, not my parents, at other people's houses had video, boxes
so
that covers
DVD.
And pictures, but not, nothing.
But never this experience Ryan had of typing something into Google and then magically it hitting enter and hitting play and closing out of all the ads and then seeing the video.
And then pursuing it later because in your heart, there's a curiosity and it does arouse something in the human heart and as a man. And so consciously choosing to say, okay, I'm going to reserve all that part of my thinking life, all that part of my physical, sexual being. I'm going to reserve that for this one woman. And you had asked if there had been I'll say aberrations, people that we had been attracted to. You mentioned somebody that you were jealous of. I wasn't attracted to this woman. Right. And what do we do with that? And you said that attraction is normal. And I would say in a sense it is, but choosing what to do with it, I think, is what really matters. And so in those cases, I don't think we've had any serious moments where I've thought to myself, wow, I work with this person, I'm really getting close to this person, I'm actually kind of attracted to this person, what should I do? No, it's more every time that thought came into my mind, I couldn't reconcile that with this woman that I've chosen to love her, and I've told you I will love you for our whole lives. And so how do I do that while also pursuing this? And so then I would bring it to her and say, listen, this is something that came up in my heart. Let's talk about it. Let's get through it. And by the way, I still love you. And Selena's response would always be, I love you too. Let's keep going. Let's work through it. And so, we're not immune to that.
I wanted to ask something you brought up earlier that kind of has to do with this. You said that it's forever. It doesn't matter how she treats you or how you treat her. You'll always love each other. You'll always commit. And having experienced multiple abusive relationships in my life, for me, the love is unconditional. Once I love someone, I really don't ever stop. So I have hundreds of people that I have loved, and there will always be love in my heart for them. But the relationship is conditional. And so when there's a certain amount of toxicity that is very clear that it's not going to resolve, I need to know when to leave. And to that effect, I think as you get to know someone, if you find out that ultimately what you both want from life is different, there should be, an exit plan so that you can both achieve what it is that you want. If that becomes no longer, tenable. But I just was curious about that for what you said you believe about, like, there's nothing that will ever change the love. I feel that way for my daughter. I think if she grew up and be a serial killer, like, I would still love her and I'd still try to help her however I could. However, she would not be living in my roof. You know?
Yeah. And that continues to be in our work that we do with married couples. That continues to be something that we wrestle through with people, because you get wives that are distraught. They're reaching out over the internet to effectively strangers. They're writing us messages through, social media.
Because of the podcast.
Because of abuse.
Yeah, because they're being abused.
No,
right?
I'm saying they're reaching out to you because of the podcast you have.
So they've heard about us. They've listened to our watched videos, whatever. And they find a way to reach out and they say, what should I do? And almost always our first piece of advice to that woman, and even in some cases to the husband, is just because you're committed to the covenant still matters. It still matters, but it doesn't mean you just need to stand there in the line of fire if a husband's abusive and the wife is being beat up every night at the home. It's like, go call the cops. The dude needs to be put in jail. Like, he needs to deal with whatever issue this is. And you're right. There is a very real kind of action plan for somebody in that case. Now, would we say, hey, now you need to go get a divorce? I think I'd be very careful to say that to them, not knowing their situation, not being their pastor, not being, in a Christian sense, not being responsible for their soul. Like, a pastor, we believe, is a shepherd, somebody who would walk through this with you lovingly, compassionately, and with the full view. So in those cases, I wouldn't do that to a stranger over the internet, but we wouldn't say, just love is forever, stay there.
You're not a doormat. That's not honoring to God, and that's not loving to each other for yourself.
I wanted to raise the question that I want to at least see you guys thought of this. The question, the prompt was, there is an ethical way and unethical way to engage in a relationship. And we all resoundingly said, yeah, of course. And so I wanted to, dig a little deeper on that, because I'm always curious about ethics. Like, it's not clear what our cultural ethic is at the moment, right? We're all very divided. I don't mean to speak with blanket statements. It feels like we're all very divided. I'll say that. So I guess I'll wear it like this. Where does your ethic stem from? And the word that I heard you use, and I think it's okay, is this idea of consent, right? There should be informed consent. This idea that a person should be able to say yes or no to something, and they should be free to say that. Why? Where does that specific ethic come from?
Yeah. I mean, I think it stems basically from a core human rights state that I think, like, much of the world tries to strive for. I think, like you said, our culture is very divided, and globally our culture is very divided. Like, there are people who grow up in completely different communities that have completely different ethics. I think, as I say with my vegan friend Elisa a lot, ethics are different for different people. And I think that's one of the beautiful things of living in this world and trying to coexist with, how many billion people are we at now? 8 billion people, is that we do have to have an understanding that looks really different for different people. But I think there's some things that, I guess, like, the more educated population, you can all agree, are generally healthy and not healthy for people. So I think it comes from, just your understanding and your access, I guess, to information. There's lots of communities that, their ethics have almost no rights or autonomy for entire populations of people. And obviously, like, I would not think that that's good or healthy or helpful.
I think it's interesting because I think you're driving at, like, the core, I'll say disagreement. Obviously, this has been very civil and polite and lovely and everything, but, like, the core disagreement between the two attitudes that we have up here, because, like, you guys believe in this thing that's bigger than yourself, these rules that have been around for so long, and that's the most important thing. And I'll speak just for me, but, like, I don't believe in that. So without somebody telling you what's right and wrong, it, to me, comes down to this idea of how would I want to be treated, and that's how I'll try and treat other people. And we all have,
which is also in the Bible.
Sure, but we all have bodily autonomy. Like, we all can understand that, like, if I inflict pain on somebody, I know that they wouldn't want that most of the time, because I know that I wouldn't want that. And so you say, why is that how it works, that consent is so important? And I think it's just because we all, like, there aren't very many universalities in life, but I think we all understand that doing something that other people don't want to you doesn't feel good, and so you shouldn't do things like that.
I agree, and you would think that, and that's why I asked the question, because this notion that a person is worth something, we agree on that here. Like, we agree that if you're a person, that you're worth,
You have value.
you're valuable, you're worthwhile, and you're important, and you're worthy of some level of respect and decorum and consent. I just don't, like, the problem with not having something bigger saying that is the truth. It opens up, like, this very subjective view of reality that says, like, basically whatever I say is ethical, it becomes ethical. So there are many societies that wouldn't agree that people, like you said, you mentioned all the atrocities that have happened. Well, it's effectively, who is to say that they're living in an unethical life without us just imposing our...
But isn't that what you're doing? Like, aren't you imposed? Like, when you say God would feel this or Jesus would feel that, I assume you don't speak to God. You don't have conversations where you run things by him and say, hey, man, what did you think about when my cousin Steve said that thing about Jessica? Like, that was right? So isn't your interpretation of God just you're channeling kind of your own beliefs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think none of us are objective when it comes to, we all rely on some version of objective ethical reality as we go about our day. And the difference is who acknowledges where that comes from. Like, if we agree that it's universal, that every person should be valued the same, where is that coming from? And here's what I'm getting at is, you've heard us say this over and over again, and I know this is grating, and it's cultural Christianity right now is grating to a lot of people. To say you're a Christian nowadays is very unpopular. But the Christian ethic says...
For many reasons.
Right.
Right,
and
we still live in, like, a Christian, like, we kowtow to the Christian way of life in America.
I will say
strongly.
that we live in a society heavily influenced by the Judeo-Christian version of ethics. Namely, and this is a human rights thing, that every person is made in the image of God, equal, valuable, worthwhile, important. Without that, that's where I start to struggle with, if we take that away, and we want to keep consent based on you are valuable, I don't know where that basis comes from. And to me, it opens up a whole new place to deconstruct things that our whole society is predicated on, not just the West, but the East as well, but love.
I would
truth,
actually argue that the
human
fundamentals of Christianity are not really actually set up that all people are equal. I would argue that the most prevalent fundamentals of Christianity, if you're literally taking biblical teachings, is, very patriarchal, and there's a lot of people that have no power. Children especially, I think, are taught from a very young age to exist in a system of self-loathing, which is very damaging. And then, like you even said, like a pastor being a shepherd for someone, there's like a very clear authority system where, like, not everyone has access to God, access to their own spiritual autonomy. So when I accepted Jesus on the toilet when I was 6 years old, I was so excited to tell my family, because that's all I'd ever been taught, that was the best thing ever. And I did. And they said, oh, no, like, it's not real yet. You're way too young. You have no idea what you're experiencing. You can't get baptized with your best friend. That's not healthy to me. Like, I want my own relationship to source.
There's something special and significant about exclusivity in a relationship.
I would agree with that. I think it's difficult to go, at least for me, who likes to hide, who takes a very long time to develop friendships, relationships, and then when I do, then I'm loyal to a fault. The exclusivity is so important, but it takes time, and in order to go deep, I need to know that, like, he's there, that I'm secure, I can feel safe with him, I can be seen. To share that with that part of me with another person, it feels very scary, no matter what I think the feelings that could be there. It feels, and maybe that's just my experience and my own perspective, but I have found so much freedom and redemption in our marriage, in what it means to love, to be loved exclusively, to be known in such a deep way. So to share that with another person would be really, really challenging for me, I think.
Do you have close female friends?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys do you talk about like things within your marriage? Like if you were struggling with Ryan or going through a rough patch, like would you talk to some of them about it?
Yes.
Do you have close male friends?
No.
Okay. I figured, but I thought I'd ask it first. Like, do you feel like the intimacy of those friendships, like, if you had to put it like what is it equal to what you have with Ryan? Is it 80% of what you have with Ryan? Is it at times maybe more than what you have with Ryan? Or like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think with the relationship of female to female, versus being married, there are some things that I think females understand about each other in a way that he may not. Some of the struggles that I face, plus we're all just human and we have our own weaknesses. And so sometimes I can express them in a way to my good girlfriends, and they can kind of see more than I can see. And so therefore they can offer more advice and more encouragement, or more of, hey, you're not seeing this right, Selena. Like, let's work through this because you're bringing this up again, and I don't think it's right. And so having that honesty there. But I think the level that I strive for is 100% with both.
Okay. And among those female friends, though, like, do you think there's any exclusivity there that adds value?
What do you mean by exclusivity? Just
like
I
having
don't
one
know, like,
best friend?
Yeah, like do you have like the hierarchy, or you're like, well, this is like my best friend and I would never talk about anything with her with this other friend who's only my second best friend, and then I have my third best friend, and like they're kind of have a ranking to them, or there's some sort of...
No, I think that depending on who the person is, I share a similar level of intimacy with them based on, I think, time and experience. But knowing who, like, their strengths and their weaknesses, I know that I can share certain things. I know I could share everything with each of them, but I know that their responses will be different. And so I trust that if I share, you know, hey, we're struggling in our marriage with finances, if I share that with one person, you know, they might be like, okay, yeah, you know, go talk about it. But if I share with another person who I know has struggled with it, they will give me some more tangible, like, hey, this is what we did when we were struggling with this kind of stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Well, I feel like you guys are kind of bracing as if I'm going somewhere with the questions, but I'm really not. I'm just curious, like, do you have like any queer friends or gay or bisexual, like, female friends?
I don't know.
I was actually curious about that too.
I don't think female. No, I have. Not currently, but I did in my past. In California, my brother is gay, and so I love him, and we talk, and we have a good relationship. And I had a lot of coworkers that were gay, and honestly, they were some of the best people I worked with. So,
But so it feels like you guys have these rules. Like, to be clear, like, I agree that there's something different about exclusivity in a relationship. I understand that. I'm not really, like, I don't think that there's obviously debating that, but I don't have any issue with that statement. Like, I'm just curious, like, because it feels like, so, like, do you have any close female friends?
Other than my mom?
No, yeah, that's
My
not
daughters?
No, they definitely
my wife?
don't count, man.
No, yeah.
Like, people who you could, if you had never met your wife, could be a romantic partner for you.
Oh, man. I've never thought about it. Well, I'll rephrase that, okay, because I don't want to sound... This is going to sound weird.
Yeah.
It's occurred to me because of again, looking at love the way we've talked about.
Yeah.
Love is it's a very wonderful thing to experience subjectively, but it's also an objective truth that we step into and we act on. It occurred to me that Selena could probably have married a number of men and still had a very happy life with him.
Or women. Stunning.
I could have married a number of women who, you know, we shared the same value system and we could carve out a life together. But this is where we are. And so this is where exclusivity is. And so in that vein, no, I've never had close female friends.
Because you see them as... It could turn into something unethical.
No, so to be clear, I have female friends. I just wouldn't say they're close friends. They're nowhere near the male friendships that I have and the level of closeness that I have with those guys. So,
as a means of loving one another and honoring one another and protecting what we have, what God's given us.
But well, I guess this would depend on your own sexuality, but like, do you have close male friends who are gay?
No, I would probably have one right that came to mind if I did. No, I
Yeah.
don't.
Like, so it feels to me like, listening to the way you guys talk about it, that you guys, anytime there's a possibility of sexual or romantic attraction, you guys instantly put up a wall because it could turn into a threat down the line. Is that fair to say?
Honestly, that's not a thought that's ever crossed my mind.
It's not intentional.
You can say what you want. I don't know that's ever actually happened because, like, if there's a woman in my life that, like, so a friend of ours, a mutual friend, like, when I see her and I talk to her, my whole focus is to see her as somebody who, like we've talked about, is somebody who is valuable, who's made in the image of God, who's worth respect. And to me, the greatest respect I can give to that woman is to honor her relationship with her husband and to honor her husband in how I treat and speak with her.
Do you all have single friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not devaluing, like, so with your single female friends, there's no husband to consider.
Yeah.
Like,
no. So I worked with a gal. She worked for me for 5-6 years, and I told Selena many times, she's like a sister to me.
okay.
And so
She's like one of my best friends.
And she, more than anyone else, would push back in work-wise in decisions, and it drove me nuts like a sister might. And I valued her friendship very much, and to this day, we still do value that friendship.
And if you were setting her up with, let's say she's single and you're setting her up on a blind date with a friend, and your friend's like, come on, man, like, I don't want to go out with, like, some ugly girl. Like, is she good looking? Like, tell me what she looks like. Is she hot? What would you say?
I would say that she would be an attractive person. Yeah.
So is she objectively attractive?
I think so. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, I think she's objectively attractive.
I
She's
think
got her life together.
I think she's beautiful.
Now, let me throw a different
package.
hypothetical at you. Sorry if I'm doing all this. I just love all these hypotheticals.
I have one thing to add.
Okay, we'll get on to a more serious thing, but like,
I'm enjoying
let's say like you two have plans to go have dinner with, what's this woman's name?
I hope she doesn't care that I say her name, Shannon.
Okay, so you guys have plans to have dinner with Shannon, and you and Shannon are already at the restaurant. All of a sudden you get a call from Selena, and you're like, babe, you know what? I feel terrible. Like, I'm not going to make it. What happens to the dinner? You guys have dinner together? Or are you like, listen, this is now wrong. Like, I have to leave.
I don't think there's any moral objection to that, not within what we would agree to ethically. But I still wouldn't do it simply because
I don't think Shannon.
I don't think she would be comfortable with that.
She would.
And I don't think Selena would be comfortable with that. Not because she doesn't trust Shannon, but because it's just weird to be out with another woman when I'm a married man.
And
optics are a thing too. Like, yeah, optics are a thing, even though we don't live for those. But still, it's Yeah.
But is any part of you guys like disappointed that like these are people that you care about and you feel close to, but you can't really like know them? And I'm leaving any kind of sexual or romantic thing out of it. Like, there are experiences you can't share with these people because of optics.
So this comes back around to the idea of exclusivity, and maybe I'll start asking you some questions. And where exclusivity comes from.
Yeah.
So you asked me to define love, or you said you use love to define love, so that's not going to work. And so the first thing that comes to mind is selflessness. Would you agree that selflessness is an aspect of love?
Yeah.
Sure, but one of Blaze and I's favorite quotes is the Walt Whitman thing where he's like, I contain multitudes, because on some sense it's selfless to love your wife, but in another sense, like you said at the very beginning of this, like we all have that deep need for human connection and that deep desire to be seen and understood by somebody, and the best way to do that is to love somebody unconditionally. So by you selflessly loving your wife, you're also pursuing what is fundamentally like a selfish, like innate desire.
I've struggled with that a lot. And so Aristotle and Kant have very different views of ethical outworkings of that exact conundrum. If I want to do something, does that make it innately selfish if it's a good and altruistic thing? And I would say that we can't escape that. So we are called to love in a selfless way. Now, when I love my wife selflessly, yes, I do get satisfaction from that. But that means that I actually do love her selflessly. So, and this is maybe the question or maybe a statement that I would say and ask you to respond to it. How can I love someone completely selflessly if I've abandoned myself to loving them? They are the object of my affection, my devotion, my desire. While also saying, but there's still 10% of me that I'm going to love this person with, because I do love you for all of you, but you don't actually meet my needs as much as I need. So now I'm going to take this 10%, I'm going to go over here. And if you want to continue loving me and be in this relationship with me, I'm going to need you to be okay with that. In other words, I'm going to need you to consent to that. And she loves me so much that she might say yes. And I'm effectively weaponizing her consent so that I can get what I want, because I'm saying to her that she's not enough for me. And to me, that drives against the whole spirit of love, which is selflessness. And so exclusivity, to me, that's where it comes in. That's why it's so special, particularly in a monogamous relationship, that there's no one else that will enter into this equation. Now, we will have people that we are close with, but it will never be this. Categorically, my guy friends, categorically it's different.
Do you know what I'm going to come back with, what metaphor money is right now?
No.
Okay. So you have 3 kids, you're expecting another. When the 4th one's born, are you going to sit your 3 kids down and say, sorry, kids, like, I know you were getting 33% of my love, but now you're only going to get 25%. Is that how you conceive of it?
No, not at all, because I do agree with what Blaise said about love as a continual, like, there's more than enough to go around. I would say I agree with that, with the exception of with romantic relationships.
Why?
Because okay, so Selena, I love you, and I've chosen to love you selflessly. And you can, in a very real sense, you can demand that from me, because you're saying to me on our wedding day, I'm going to love you too, selflessly. So if I say that to her and I give her all of myself, but then one day I come to her and say, you know what, there's this close friend that I'm realizing that you don't actually fulfill all my sexual needs. Because really that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like
No,
Absolutely not.
I agree with that.
romantic emotional needs, romantic sexual needs. Are those 2 categories sound? Are there other categories I'm missing?
Sure,
Like
just go ahead with
I'm very concrete. So
That's fine. You can go with that framing.
Well, how is that going to make my wife feel when I've told her within our covenant, I'm going to love you with everything that I am, except for this little part? And here's the thing. So I'm going to take that and I say, okay, I love you, but today you're not actually on the menu. This is horrible verbiage, but effectively, today is not a day that I can feel loved by you. So I'm going to find another way to be loved. Here's the thing, is when I do that, I'm not only robbing her of my full devotion, but I'm actually robbing myself of the entire experience of love. Because as long as I feel like I'm holding back just even a sliver of myself, 1%, 0.1%, I'll always think, and maybe not at the front of my mind, and we've been here and we can talk about some of our own transparency within our own marriage, but I'll always think that, yes, I know Selena loves me, I know this, but I don't know this, because if she knew that 1% of me, she would reject me. So instead, I give it all to her. Transparency, all my faults, all my failures. Every time I felt like I've messed up, I go to her and I say, do you still love me? And because of this love that we've defined, I know that she's going to say, yes, I still love you.
I noticed what you're saying right now and what you said in both in your emails. Like, your sense of identity was wrapped up first in your love of God, your understanding of God, your religion, and then your love of each other. So it seems like this is true for you, that you have your full sense of self is contingent on these relationships and experiences. For me, I don't think that that's necessarily healthy, because I just think that there is supposed to be a little part of you that is for you, and not in a secretive way, in like I'm holding back from someone or I'm hiding anything or there's any, lack of transparency, but like I am the main character in my life story. And whatever happens with anyone else, with my evolving belief systems, with things that I learn or come across that like change my values or beliefs, like my autonomy and my sense of self come from myself, not from external variables, not from other people. Definitely to an extent from a spiritual source, but even that has evolved over the years, what I think and feel and believe to be true. I do think that exclusivity has a place in many people's lives. I think that it can be the authentic choice. And there's ways to exist within the ethics of polyamory and ethical non-monogamy and experience exclusivity at times. I also think that like literally biologically and experientially, there are many people who don't feel that way. And so it is constantly a pivot from their most authentic, true self to choose that. You're saying that that's like the healthiest option for you and that that is what you believe is best and healthiest for everyone, for your family structure, for your life. I think that it's not necessarily true, and it's why there are thousands, if not millions of Christians who do get divorced or do end up in really unhealthy family structures or patterns of abuse or patterns of behavior, because there is hiding and there is shame for like how they authentically feel or what would be the most authentic choice. I know a couple that just moved into my neighborhood. They're major burners, went to Burning Man all the time. They were open. She was dating multiple people when he like really expressed that he wanted to marry her eventually. You know, she moved through that phase, and then right now they're exclusive and they have a baby together and they're putting all of their attention and love on each other and that child, and it's absolutely beautiful. And she also said to me that they're very much aware that at some point down the line, there may be other things that pop up. There may be other doors that need to be opened, and that because of the love that they have that is not contingent on them, like silencing their own, you know, truest desires, that it actually creates more of a sense of safety for them. They feel more authentically in love with each other because it's not conditional in that way. And I get what you're saying about it being conditional, like, oh, you have to consent to this while I go do this. I don't think that that's helpful. But to some degree, like, that is also what you're doing, because you're saying, like, well, you have to consent to being exclusive for it to work.
And that's the essence of love, isn't it? Self-sacrifice and self, like 100% mutual exchange of one another, and saying, I will give my entire self to you gladly. And in return.
I guess that's where
is that really possible? Like, off camera, I brought up football, and you lit up, and you were like, let's talk about it.
Well, it's easy to talk
and
about.
And Selena was like, here we go with this. Like, so you guys don't have all the same interests. You don't have, like, I'm sure there's things that you want to watch on TV that you have no interest in watching. Like, so when you say you're giving all of yourself, there are other needs that you have that are met by male platonic friends and met by female platonic friends. And then there's, I would hope you guys have alone time for yourself where you do stuff that is just for you. Yeah. So how does that line up with saying you've given all of yourself? I mean, I understand, like, you've never, like, slept with anyone else. But
well, I guess that was my question to Blaze, is what makes you feel, or why do you have to, why do you feel that you have to keep a part of yourself just for yourself? Where does that come from? I can understand. I just want to hear your answer to that.
I think that's where I was saying, like, what you keep saying is that what love is for you is that it is 100%, giving 100% of yourself to the other person. And for me, like, that's not healthy. For me, like, I am safest in my own sense of, like, trusting my body, trusting my brain, trusting myself to take care of myself, when I do know that at the end of the day, like, I've got me, you know? And that doesn't mean that I don't develop trust and I don't develop beautiful connections with people, but, like, we come into this world alone. We come into this world in connection. We come to this world depending literally on a source of life that is another person. But at the end of the day, like, we do die alone. Like, nobody, like, comes through that, whatever death is, the tunnel, going into heaven, going to hell, going into the ether, energetically, whatever it is, which honestly none of us, like, truly know. It's a solo experience. And, like, I've had to really face that recently with cancer, and knowing that, like, no matter how much I share with Ian, no matter he's been there with me in the hospital, like, there's been many times where I've had to really face that concept of, like, that is something I will go through alone. And even what I'm going through with cancer, like, we are sharing that every moment and every part of it, but, like, he's not in my body. It's my body. You know, he's not in my brain. And so we're there to support each other and to share in each other's journey. But, like, we ultimately are both the stars of our own shows. and we're there to, like, you know, rock it out. But, like, there's no, like,
instead of mutually sacrificing, we're mutually encouraging each other to get more of what we want and more of what would bring joy to ourselves.
And sometimes that leads to, like, beautiful togetherness, and sometimes it leads to space. And I think that that's, like, beautiful.
I think space is okay. There's a big difference, I think, between me time and I don't want to be around you. kind of like I need my own thing time. Like not.
But I would argue that that's actually really healthy to say, like, there are times where I don't want to be around you. And
we say that to each other.
Yeah,
that's not, we're not just like, oh, we're just always together. There's times where we're like, okay, we just need a little space, and that's okay. But that doesn't diminish, that doesn't take away from my devotion to him. I'm still committed to him. I'm still going to give of myself sexually to him. Like that doesn't take anything away from what's in here. It's just, okay, we're two human beings. We've spent so much time together. I think we just need a little space, but it doesn't mean it's not an opportunity for me to seek out any other sort of intimacy with someone else, whether that be emotionally or sexually or anything like that.
Okay, well, first off, it's been lovely talking to you both and hearing about your life, and the love you have for you guys, for each other is like palpable. I think I see a lot of similarities in the way that we think about love and talk about love. Like when you talk about unconditionally loving your partner and acknowledging that there's a benefit to you in that, and just like being the truest version of yourself. Like that's a lot of the way of how I feel about like unconditionally loving Blaze. I think the biggest difference that I see between us, honestly, is that Blaze and I's whole attitude is that this structure works for us, and we see that your structure works for you, and neither is better. Because to me, what has happened in both of these is informed adults have consented to the relationship structure that they're in, and it feels like this whole time you guys have felt that the way you guys love each other is somehow better than the way that Blaze and I love each other, and you're welcome to believe that and all, but I would just question that if you truly believe, as you say, that because of God, like all humans have value, like then shouldn't the way that we value living our lives be equally as valid as the way that you guys value living your lives? And then beyond what you think of us, like within your own relationship, it seems that you guys feel like self-sacrifice is really awesome, and it's why we have this love. But when you look at the person you love and see them sacrificing pieces of themselves to fit what you want and what you need, like, does not some part of you feel like, I wish they didn't have to sacrifice that? I wish Ryan could be all of who he is, or I wish Selena could have everything that she wants in this life. And could you ever envision like a world where you guys are more open about doing things that you guys both want to do rather than just defaulting to whatever your faith tells you is okay and acceptable? And I know you guys can't answer these questions, and I wish we had more time to go back and forth because it's honestly been so interesting, and I really hope that you guys know that I totally respect like what you guys have, and think it's really awesome that you came here to talk to us today in such an open way and really seemed genuinely curious to get to know what we think.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I think for me, a closing statement is like we opened a lot by talking about what is love. And I feel like there is so much love here in this room, you two between each other, us. And then I think even us as strangers, like sharing this connection and this open-heartedness, you know, very much mimics like what I grew up with, the idea of like Christian love for your neighbor. I've felt that here. And so like that's just beautiful. And to me, ultimately, what that supports is the idea that love has many, many, like countless expressions. And so I just think like what I would want people to get from this conversation is like understanding that those expressions, so long as they are helpful, not hurting anyone, can look a myriad of different ways. And that ultimately all of our ethics come partially from internal, like how we feel, what feels right, what our gut brain is telling us to do, and then also from our education. So you grew up with information and access to a lot of biblical teaching and a lot of structure that provided that for you. I also grew up with that, and it did not resonate for many reasons. And I think that a lot of those structures can promote really like toxic forms of love. And so for me, like I've gone out and found other texts and other models and other things that work really well for me. And so I just think like we live in this beautiful world where like ethics do mean different things for different people. Love does mean different things for different people. You know, how can we practice more and more tolerance as opposed to saying this is the structure that needs to work for everyone because like it definitely will be successful. I think I know polyamory is not successful for a lot of people. And I also know evidence, yes, that monogamy doesn't work for a lot of people. And so I think like it's actually really beautiful to accept those differences and find what really, really feels like truest and most authentic for you. And so like our viewers, I hope would also just be liberated by seeing this conversation, seeing the respect, seeing like just different ideas, and knowing that like there are many, many, many paths to really deep forms of love and expressions of love. So.
Awesome.
I want to echo, I think, what Ian is saying of just thanks for showing up and for being open and sharing things that have happened to you guys, sharing about your relationship, which I have more questions about, but of course I can't ask them right now. And thank you for just being honest, I think, about your fears or your convictions and how you want to live, because I think, like you said, until we can be honest with each other, until we can kind of lay those out, show all our cards on the table, we really can't even have a dialogue. And so I feel like today's been really great for my heart. Obviously, as a believer, the biggest hope I would want to leave you with, and none of us, I think, are immune to Christian hurt or church hurt. We both walked through a very hard time during pastors not pastoring well. And that took us for a pivot for a number of years. And the thing I just want to say is that until I heard the gospel, like truly heard the gospel, the life of Jesus coming down, laying his life down for me while I'm still a sinner, while I'm still broken, I'm still not living the way that I need to be living, but he is making me better in that. It's not all me just choosing that. He really is at work in me. He is the only one I can share and leave the viewers with, leave you with, that he does love you and that he is calling you to him. And Christians have they've done a good job of messing some of the message of the gospel up. And we've been victims of that. And I would apologize, but I haven't hurt you. But I feel like as a Christian, there needs to be like apologies, because I don't think that you've heard the gospel, that you've heard that God loves you and that he died for you and that he rose again to seal eternity. But he did that. And our response can only be one of either rejection or acceptance. And you talk about the rules and the things that we live by. That first began with knowing God and knowing what he did for me and for us while we were still sinners. And to just speak to one last thing that you said of being afraid, of being alone in the moments of death and facing that unknown. I'm just reminded of a verse that he says, "Never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you." Because I've thought of those moments many times. I haven't been faced with cancer, but I've thought of what would happen in those moments. Will I be alone? What fears are going to take over? Or will that even be? Will there be fears? And I'm just reminded that because of the gospel, I am secure with my King, and he will not leave or forsake me. And I'm just grateful for that. And I just can only share him and leave him with you guys. So
look at all that eye contact you're giving us. You've come so far.
Yeah, I'll echo my lovely bride here. This whole conversation has been awesome. Just to hear you guys and to see your hearts come out and through your eyes and through your voice. And but I always kind of, as you've probably gotten the sense that I'm very concrete and I think in these terms, and I ask myself, what is the point of this? Why do we care? Like, why do we care how you, like, and if I'm honest, like I care because now I've met you, and now I could say maybe we're acquaintances, maybe even friends. Like, I care because I know you. But on a grand scheme, like, I don't really have a stake in like making people have a relationship the way that I want them to have a relationship, other than, and this is the kicker, other than I don't think it's about us. I think it's about so much more than just us. That our marriage is not just about how can I get from Selena what I want to get from her? Blaze, how can you get from Ian what you want to get from him, and vice versa? Your relationships, it's not just about us. There's something there that is deeper, that's in the human heart, that is an archetype of a love that we've been given. You guys probably know this verse. You know it for sure because you grew up in the church, but John 3:16, right? God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him might have everlasting life, right? It's a cliche. But the word there, God so loved the world. For so is it's a Greek word that means in this specific way. In this way to go down, to become flesh, to invite them into relationships so that they can be redeemed out of their sin. Not because of, Ian, what you said, not because I did the right things, but just because God loved you in that specific way. So when I love Selena in all her faults, and she loves me in all my faults, I can see a glimpse of the love that I've experienced from God through Christ. And so that's the final thought that I leave with you, is that, Blaze, you don't have to cross that threshold solo. Like, there's a Savior that will be with you here, be with you now, indwell you here, the Holy Spirit, and walk with you across that threshold and then into eternity. And you're not there just hoping that it all worked out, but you're there standing on a firm hope that is Christ, who is the anchor for your soul.
That's a wrap.
All right.
All right.